Good evening and welcome to this edition of Africa in Focus with myself, Kwame, Ghanaian writer, broadcaster, podcaster, historian, entrepreneur, and reason. And in this week's edition of Africa in Focus is the war in D R Congo, why you must know about the war in D R Congo. So we all know about the war in Gaza, yeah, but most of you don't know about the war in D R Congo because it's not getting any coverage, certainly in the Western media and also in African media. We don't really talk about African issues. We talk about things in Europe and Asia, like what happened in Venezuela, but we don't talk about what's happening close to home on our continent, yeah? And this war has been going on for years, and particularly as Black people, you must be aware of it. And also, why it's important to you that you know about it. I'm going to explain that in a minute, particularly if you own an iPhone. And so before we start the show, if you like what you hear, please share to your friends, family, social media networks, subscribe to Ghana African Banks on YouTube, hit the notification bell, meaning every time we upload a new podcast, YouTube will notify of you. So subscribe to your friends and family about Ghana African Focus. Again, we're on Spotify as of all the other platforms, but Spotify is a big one. So look out for Ghana African Focus on Spotify. Hit the follow button. Again, meaning that every time we download a podcast on Spotify, they will notify you. All right, and if you want to help us contribute to the show, we do accept donations. That will help us to continue to bring some more great content coming out the content coming from Ghana. And like I mentioned, within last week, we've got some great content coming out for you this year. We're going to do a lot of in-depth interviews, analysis about issues in Ghana and also the African continent. So this one is the first one of these, looking at the war in DR Congo. And so if you'd like to contribute to the show, you can click the donate button, the support button, and I will leave you the link to that in the footnotes to the show. Okay, so let's get into the show, talking about the war in DR Congo and why you must be aware of it, particularly if you have an iPhone. Now, did you know that your iPhone or iPad or your Apple Mac, if you own one of those, you are indirectly complicit in the murder, blood, rape, and castration of Black men and Black women, and you're also indirectly involved in the child labor for the rich materials like coltan, cobalt, lithium, and titanium that are mainly found in DR Congo that is used to make your iPhone, your iPad, and your Apple Mac, yeah? So Apple, we tell you why Apple's going to deeply involved, but, this link that is linking Apple to the murder and war in DR Congo has been supported by various reports and lawsuits which allege that the demand for the components in iPhones and other smartphones contributes to the deaths, unwarranted deaths, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So let me give you a breakdown, yeah? And this is why it's important that you listeners who have iPhones, iPads, Apple MacBooks, listen to this. So here's a breakdown of the situation based on available information. Now, the first one, conflict minerals and exploitation. The Democratic Republic of Congo is so rich in minerals, like I mentioned before, cobalt, coltan, tin, tungsten, which are essential minerals for producing smartphones, laptops, electric cars, and batteries. So these minerals are crucial not just to the laptops and smartphones, but also to the AI, fourth industrial revolution. Now, child labor and dangerous working conditions. So this is a report, or reports rather, have shown that children as young as 8 years old, as young as 8, beloved, work in artisanal, small-scale cobalt mines in DR Congo. And I've got videos of this to prove it. Well, it's been reported, so this is not hyperbole, this is actual fact. So they're working these cobalt mines in DR Congo, often under dangerous conditions. These miners, they literally use their hands to dig up the coltan for these big companies like Apple. Yeah. And sometimes they die in tunnel collapse, when the tunnel collapses. That when they're digging for the coltan in these unsafe mines, yeah. Some of these young children as young as 8 are dying because you want your latest iPhone. You want the latest Apple Mac. You want the latest iPad. What is the latest iPhone now? iPhone 17, iPhone 17 Pro Max. Yeah. You are responsible for the bloodshed in DR Congo because you want the latest iPhones. Again, further evidence that Apple is involved. So lawsuits against tech companies. So in 2019, a lawsuit was filed in the US against Apple, Google, Dell, Microsoft, and Tesla, accusing them of aiding and abetting the deaths and serious injury of children who were mining cobalt in the supply chain. Now, armed conflict and funding, the mining and smuggling of these precious minerals are often linked to armed groups that use the profits to fuel conflict in the Eastern DRC. In 2024, the DRC government filed legal complaints in France and Belgium against Apple, accusing the company of using conflict minerals in its products. Apple's response: Apple have disputed these allegations, stating that they hold their suppliers to high standards and they have instructed suppliers to suspend sourcing from the DRC if they cannot verify the minerals are not from conflict areas. So, this proves the link, whether it's directly or indirectly, that even though the iPhone itself as a product does not directly cause a death, the demand for the raw materials used inside the iPad, inside the iPhone, inside the Apple Mac, yeah, is linked to the forced labor, forced child labor in particularly, right, and financing armed groups within the conflict of DR Congo. So this is why I said, if you own an iPad, an iPhone, an Apple Mac, you need to be aware of what your consumerism or what your demand for the iPhones, iPad, Apple Mac is having in the ongoing conflict in DR Congo. Let's give you now, so we've talked about how you as a consumer are indirectly responsible for the bloodshed. Let's give you now an analysis, yeah, of the origin of the conflict and who the main players are involved and why the conflict is still raging on today. So, let's go back to the very, very beginning, yeah, when DR Congo, yeah, got its independence from Belgium in 1960. Don't forget before that, Belgium was or rather DR Congo was a private enterprise that was given to the Belgians, but specifically King Leopold, in the aftermath of the 1884-1885 Berlin Congress, where the Europeans, the white people, yeah, including Russia was there but didn't get any piece of the pie, carved up Africa like a pizza. So the map you see of Africa today had its genesis in that Berlin Conference of 1884-1885. And during that time, from 1885 to about 1960, King Leopold ruled the Congo as if it was his own private company. And in the aftermath of that, or within that era, yeah, when King Leopold was given Belgium or was given Congo as his own enterprise, 10 million Africans was killed because he ruled on the reign of terror. Yeah. But also particularly in the rural plantation because D R Congo, apart from having these massive resources like coltan, cobalt, lithium, etc., that is used to make electric cars, electric batteries, etc., phones, etc., D R Congo also has fantastic rural plantations that is used to make some of the world famous tires that is used on your cars. Yeah. So because King Leopold wanted massive, you know, return on investment, he demanded excess labor from the Congolese people. And if the Congolese people didn't meet their target, they literally had their limbs and hands cut off. Yeah. And even were murdered by Leopold's vicious regime. So we all know about the Jewish Holocaust, when Hitler killed 60 million Jews plus. Yeah, but most of you don't know about King Leopold, who killed over 10 million African Congolese when he had the Democratic Republic of Congo, as a private company. Why didn't this taught in schools in this country, or in Belgium, or in Germany, or in France? It's not taught. But you all know about the Holocaust, the Jewish Holocaust. So, moving fast forward, Congo gained independence from Belgium on June 30th, 1960, with the charismatic Patrice Lumumba as Prime Minister and Joseph Kasavubu as President. Now, it is said that Lumumba gave a speech that annoyed the Belgian imperialists. Yeah, because Lumumba, in a nutshell, talked about the vicious brutality, yeah, and civilized behavior of Belgium, and said that as Prime Minister, he's going to nationalize all those minerals, yeah, that the West were taking even then free of charge. So this angered Belgium and also the Western Hemisphere, the Western powers like France, Britain, America, and they saw Lumumba as a threat. And just called him a communist. The man was not a communist. He was an African nationalist. But obviously their narrative, they call him a communist. And so Lumumba inherited a state where there was no trained armed forces, a politicized army, and an economy still controlled by Belgium and the Western corporate interests. Yeah? So within weeks, forced public communities, Belgium sends troops to protect its citizens and the mineral-rich Katanga province, yeah, which is backed by Western and Belgian business interests. Yeah. So this is the beginning of the downfall of Lumumba, because when Lumumba wanted to nationalize the resources in Eastern Congo, which is the richest real estate in the world, the Belgians, backed by Western business interests, went there to protect it. Yeah. And so Lumumba was viewed, as I said, a communist. And so when the Belgian sent troops to Katanga province, right, Lumumba turned to the United Nations, which you all know is controlled by America, for help against Belgian interference. That failed, yeah? And this is why he reached out to USSR. So within the so-called Cold War context, the US, Belgium, and allies see him as a threat, alongside his African nationalist tendencies. And Nkrumah sent troops, knowing this, Nkrumah of Ghana sent Ghanaian troops to try and help protect Lumumba. But again, that had its issues because of how the West wanted to get rid of Lumumba, because Lumumba was a Pan-Africanist, an African nationalist, but also somebody who wanted to give the wealth to the people, not give the wealth to elite of Western-backed companies. And so because of this, Lumumba is arrested, deposed, and assassinated in a coup in January 1961 with direct Belgian involvement and Western complicity. When we talk about Western, we talk about Britain, America, France, Germany, etc. You get the point. Yeah? So this is the genesis of the warfare and strife that has hit DR Congo ever since. Yeah, the downfall, including the assassination of Lumumba, that was ordered by the then American President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Because he said, whoever controls Congo controls Africa, whoever controls Africa controls the world. I'm going to say that again. Dwight D. Eisenhower said, whoever controls the Congo controls Africa, whoever controls Africa controls the world. Showing you that's not Africa that is begging, but the West are begging because they need Africa's raw materials even then. 60 odd years ago, even then, 65 years ago, when Lumumba was killed, 55 years ago, when Lumumba was killed. Yeah, this week actually, because today's the 17th of January, when I'm doing this show, live recorded, Lumumba was murdered exactly 65 years ago today. Think about it now. Think about it, listeners. The great Patrice Lumumba was murdered 65 years ago today. Why? Because he wanted the Congo to be free from Western interference, and he wanted the mineral wealth of the country to benefit its people, not to benefit elites and also Western business interests. So because of this, Lumumba was killed. And this starts the whole chaos that we see in D R Congo. So Mobutu, Colonel Joseph Desire Mobutu, seizes power first in a coup, and then definitely in 1965 with strong US and Belgian support as a so-called reliable anti-communist partner. Check this now. And this is in files on the Council of Foreign Relations. So this is not me saying it, this is the Council of Foreign Relations, which is a Western neo-colonial organization. Yeah. So Mobutu, this treacherous African, was put in there by the white man to safeguard their interests in DR Congo. So Mobutu renames the country Zaire, and he built a patronage system and centralizes power while siphoning off massive wealth. It is estimated that Mobutu, in his near 40-year rule, 32-year rule, 65 to 97, he siphoned off in excess of $5 billion US. Yeah. Western governments tolerate and fund his murderous regime because Mobutu was giving them free access, right, to the strategically mineral-rich Katanga province in particular, but also the country per se. Yeah. So, within Mobutu's authoritarian rule, which is supported by the Western governments, i.e. Britain, America, France, Belgium, etc., copper, cobalt, diamonds, and other mineral resources remain under foreign and elite control. Not the people of the DRC, but foreign and elite control. The ordinary Congolese people see little benefit, and state institutions hollow out, setting the stage for state collapse once Mobutu weakens. And we'll come on to how he weakened in a minute. Yeah, shows you how the West put in place a puppet who would do the aiding and abetting and allow them to have free access to an African country's mineral-rich resources. Yeah. So now we come into place the Kagame connection. So in the aftermath of the Rwandan genocide in 1994, yeah, militias, yeah, ex-FAR and Interahamwe flee into Eastern Congo. Mobutu's weak state cannot or will not disarm these militia groups. Rwanda under Kagame, and Uganda under Yoweri Museveni, who is seeking a 7th term in power. And you wonder why he's seeking 7th term, because he's a puppet of the West. They see hostile forces on their border and a chance to reshape the region in their image. So Rwanda and Uganda become proxies for Western aiding and abetting in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So the first major Congo war, yes, after the Mobutu years, yeah, difference between 1996 and 1997. So Mobutu was really deposed around about 94, around about 95, 96. So Rwanda and Uganda backed Laurent Desire Kabila. He was essentially a Lumumbrist African nationalist, yeah, and the AFDL rebellion to overthrow Mobutu. Now, with regional and tacit Western acceptance, because Mobutu now is now seen as a liability to the West. So after he's been used by the West for 30 odd years, he now becomes a liability because the West don't want him no more. You see how the white man behaves? So when the white man wants you, he loves you, he respects you, right? But when he got no use for you anymore, he just dumps you. Like, you know, like a man being dumped or a woman being dumped by a man, just dump you, yeah? So because, you know, the West no longer support Mobutu because it serves its purpose, Kabila marches across the country and takes power in 1997, renaming Zaire the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And again, you can get this information on the Council of Foreign Relations archives, yeah? Now we move on to the Second Congo War between 1978 and 2003. So relations sour when Kabila tries to assert more autonomy and asks Rwandan and Ugandan troops to leave. So these Rwandan and Ugandan troops are backed by the West, because the white man don't want to send any of his people in. So what he does, he supports proxy African armies. So Kagame's army, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, yeah, and also Ugandan troops that were loyal to Yoweri Museveni, yeah. So because Laurent Kabila, who was a nationalist like Lumumba, wanted to take control of the mines for the people, not by Western elites, yeah, he told Rwanda and Uganda to leave. However, because of the Western proxy and they know what they're doing and want from the Congo, Western-backed Rwanda and Ugandan troops, they now back new rebellions in the east, yeah? And Angola, Zimbabwe, under Mugabe, Namibia, the late Sam Nujoma, and other Africans back Kabila because they understand Kabila's motive of nationalizing the industry, and also they understand of the geopolitical games that have been played in DR Congo. And so you have about half a dozen African countries backing Kabila. So this is termed in quote by the Western media Africa's First World War. Yeah, millions died from violence, hunger, and disease. Again, you can get this in the Council of Foreign Relations archive. Now, Kabila, because of his Pan-African instinct and is also wanting to nationalize the mines, Laurent Kabila is assassinated in 2001 under very, very circumspect and dubious circumstances. But we all know why Kabila was assassinated, because he was not a puppet, or he would not allow himself to become a puppet like Mobutu by the West. And so Laurent Kabila was assassinated in 2001. His son Joseph Kabila takes over, knows what he did to his father, so he negotiates peace deal and oversees a formal end to the war in 2003-2006. However, the mineral-rich part of the DR Congo, Eastern Congo, remains militarized and fragmented. Yeah, so this further, makes the country insecure because of the high militarization and fragmentation of the area. Now we go deep into Kagame's role and the RPF, so-called Rwandan Patriotic Front. So in 1994, in the aftermath of the Rwandan genocide, Kagame and his Rwandan Patriotic Front come to power. Now, Rwanda presents its interventions in Eastern DRC as so-called self-defense against so-called genocidal forces. However, United Nations and human rights reports have documented repeatedly that Rwanda and Ugandan involvement in backing rebel groups and, in essence, profiting from Congolese minerals, i.e. cobalt, gold, tin, etc. Yeah? And these Rwandan and Ugandan troops are backed by the West because the white man will not send his own troops like we're doing in Ukraine or whatever, because they don't want them to die. They rather use proxies like Kagame's people and Museveni's soldiers to go in there and do their bidding. Yeah? So this is clearly, you see treacherous Africans like Kagame of Rwanda and Museveni of Uganda being used by the West to protect their interests in Eastern DRC. And now we slip in there the birth of M23. M23, another murderous, treacherous African organization, emerges around about 2012 from a previous rebel group aligned to Kagame, right? CNDP, okay? And who is linked to Kagame. However, they are composed mainly of Congolese Tutsi fighters, yeah? Now, UN experts and multiple governments have accused Rwanda of backing M23 military and logistically, which Kigali denies. Now, I want to put out there, right, who armed M23 and who made the arms that Rwanda is using, that Museveni is using, and that the M23 is using. Who made those arms? Because no African country makes arms. Yeah, unlike Britain and America, the two biggest suppliers of arms, no African country makes arms. So this is why we say the West is complicitly involved in this bloodshed. Despite the fact that they've got their troops on the ground, they are complicit in arming both sides and are making the weapons that arm both sides. So we now come to the current crisis. So since 2021, the M23 has resurged with itself, seizing territory in North Kivu and displacing hundreds of thousands of African people. The conflict is on top of a dense web of armed groups, like that we've mentioned, local elites that we've mentioned, like Kagame and others, foreign armies, i.e. there's some white mercenaries we know who are also in there. There's even reports that, the Russian, Russian-backed Wagner group were in there as mercenaries as well. And we know there's also smuggling networks tied to global supply chains for coltan, cobalt, gold, and other minerals that are used in phones, lithium batteries for your electric cars, and also green tech industries like solar panels. And so, this is where, if you can connect the dots, you can connect Paul Kagame, Yoweri Museveni, and M23 directly to the continuing of the war on DRC. Yeah? And you can add to that the Western backers of Kagame, the Western backers of Museveni. This is why Museveni, again, has rigged the election that was last Thursday. Yeah? Because he's backed by the West. And as long as Museveni is a dime of the West, which has been for 40 years, Museveni will always remain in power because it is the interest of the West to keep Museveni in power. And so, in wrapping up, Eastern Congo holds huge reserves of coltan, cobalt, copper, gold, and tin, which are increasingly important in battery, products that are used for electric cars, Hoovers, dishwashers, smartphones, smart TVs, smart laptops, etc. These are essential to these electronics I've mentioned about. Yeah. So control over the money, mines, trade routes, and taxation points is a core driver of armed group activity and foreign interference. And so, the Congolese state, from the time of Lumumba, remains under-resourced, corrupt, and fragmented, especially in the east. Yeah, and Rwanda, Uganda, and sometimes Burundi intervene directly, yeah, or via proxies. And we know Western and global powers really challenge this structure. Why? Because their own companies sit at the end of the supply chain, like we mentioned, Apple. Yeah. And so, in wrapping up and closing, we as Africans need to understand that this war, which has killed more than 10 million Africans, which has displaced, 8 million Africans, which has, resulted deaths of tens of thousands of children, young children under 8, 9, 10. Many African women have been raped by drug-fueled soldiers. Yeah, it is a curse, or rather, it is a scar on the conscience of Africa that we've allowed this war to fester for more than 50 years in different guises, all because of Western greed and African complicity. And so, like I said, if you own an iPhone, you are directly involved in the murder, rape, and bloodshed going on in DR Congo. And I leave it for you and your conscience to deliberate if you still want to be associated with this war by owning an iPhone, iPad, Apple Mac. And so this brings to an end this edition of Africa in Focus with myself, Kwame, Ghanaian writer, producer, podcaster, entrepreneur, historian, and lecturer. If you like what you hear, please share to your friends, your family, social media networks. Subscribe to Ghana African Focus on YouTube. Subscribe to Ghana African Focus on Spotify. All right, and so next week's episode, we'll be telling you why Africans in Britain must leave. Very, very important topic for next week. Why Black people in the UK must leave the UK before it's too late. And so for myself, Kwame, from all the crew here on African Focus, thank you very much for listening. And we see you in the next edition of Africa in Focus.